Okay, so this is my invitational speech. Question 1. You make the argument that if the minimum wage is raised, individuals may be at risk for losing their job. But many people who are making minimum wage in our society today are losing jobs due to the increase of technology such as the self-checkout and self-ordering stations at fast food restaurants such as McDonald's. So here's my answer. My answer my answer to this is I really don't think you can link the unemployment rate to the self checkouts because the self checkouts have been around in America since 2003, and uh, when you look back to when self checkouts first started, we have and compare it to now, we've had two recessions, which spiked in 2008, and we've been up to the highest unemployment rate in 2008 at about 10%, and to now where we are at the lowest the United States has ever been. For question 2, we have you stated that many small businesses would have to lay individuals off because they would be unable to afford raising the minimum wage. But small businesses are often short staffed as it is, so if they raised the minimum wage, they could raise the price of their items to compensate for that money. Yeah, I agree that uh, most small businesses are short-staffed already. But my point was that businesses would eventually go out of business because of having to lay people off due to the fact of not affording the new minimum wage. From my personal knowledge of my friend's parents' uh, restaurant, they are already trying to scrape by and already having pricey items, and I know for a fact that the people that go to that restaurant are already making more than $15 an hour, and I believe that they will, if the minimum wage was to be raised to that $15 an hour, they could raise the price, but then fall short on the customers that come in, and then if they lower the price back down to their normal prices, and get more customers, they're gonna have to lay a couple people off to compensate for that money. Question number 3 says you brought up the topic of inflation, but in reality, inflation is always a factor in the economy, and it is something everyone has to compensate for. Okay. If inflation was accounted for by the government, we would not have to talk about this right now. If they would have accounted for for inflation a long time ago, they would have continued raising the minimum wage each year to balance the two. But the government has not, so they are a little behind right now. And so in 1960, for $100, $100 would be equivalent to $872 and 1 cent, which is a difference of $772 and 1 cent. The inflation rate in 1960 was only 1.72%. And I'm saying, all I am saying is that if inflation was already always counted for, people would not be needing a raise. For question 4 says, on the topic of livable wage, you mentioned that people have said that the minimum wage would need to be raised to $18.87 an hour for it to be considerable livable. So how do you expect a young adult trying to make it on their own right out of high school to survive making minimum wage as of now it is 9:45? Yes. Right, yeah. So economists have calculated that $15 wage is not nearly enough money to count for inflation by the time 2025 happens. And right now, actually, the minimum wage nationally is $7.25. But I'm I am blaming the government being so far behind on the minimum wage that if it was to be raised to $15, it is such a large jump to that small businesses would hurt from that. And I just believe that the government needs to make up for their mistakes and not punish the people for their own mistakes.